Hello and welcome to the end week edition of I'm Still Playing. This week I'm getting to dive into what is definitely one of the most anticipated games of the year, and also it turns out one of the most divisive games of this decade, Dragon Age: The Veilguard. Now, even though I only have maybe, I don't know, 12, 15 hours in the game so far, there's definitely still lots to unpack. So I'm going to be talking about what I've seen so far, what I like, and what I didn't much care for. Before I go too much further though, I do want to touch on two subject areas. First, on the subject of spoilers. It is almost impossible to show footage of this game without showing some cinematic moments from the game. So I'm not going to be talking about any major story points along the way, but I will be showing footage of the game, including some parts of some of the cinematics. If you wish to remain absolutely 100% spoiler free because you haven't yet purchased the game, you've been warned. Second, on the subject of the culturally divisive areas about the game, I've actually already given my take on those subject areas in a previous video, and I absolutely encourage you to go check that out. I'll be linking it at the end of this video. But this video is only going to be about the gameplay itself. So without further ado, let's jump in. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is character creation, because that's one of the first things you encounter in the game. And actually the character creation is very robust. However, though, I did find it, like some Bethesda games, to be a little hard to make a character that isn't, I don't know, what's the right term? Soft, I guess is the right term. But overall, I mean, the animations, or I should say the hairstyles are fantastic. There's lots of things to choose from. You've got a lot of choices for creating your character. One part of it that I didn't much care for was the way that you shape your head or determine your head structure. So it asks you to select 3 different head styles or head shapes from a whole collection of head shapes. And then you move this slider around the 3 points of this triangle and morph between those 3 head shapes. I found this interface to be very awkward, unintuitive, difficult to use, and honestly, no matter what head shapes I chose, I felt like I was almost always making things worse. But I soldiered on. My goal was to try to recreate Miriam from Dragon Age Absolution, and this was my reference, and including her sort of largely triangular shaped face. And I used this element of the character creation to try to do that. And in the end, I actually think I got pretty close. And so I was happy with the character creation when I left character creation. But as soon as I started watching my character and their overuse of facial animations in some of the cinematics, I became much less happy with what I had done. However, though, this is actually one of the things that Dragon Age: The Veilguard does really well. They allow you to revisit character creation at any point in the game after like the first 10 minutes of the game. So, which is fantastic, right? You go back to the Mirror of Transformation, and I've already gone back to the character creator like 3 different times in order to try to get my character in a way that I felt really happy with. And they allow you to do that for no charge. And I think this is an incredibly smart move on their part. So super happy in the end with the character creation. So once you're finished with character creation, you're treated to a little opening cinematic that sets the story, and then you're dropped into the game itself. And if you watch the gameplay video that BioWare released, you've actually already seen this whole segment already. But it's our first chance to check out one of the other things that I'm interested in, or one of the next things that I'm interested in, and that are the animations. And overall, honestly, I would say I find the animations to be a bit of a mixed bag. I'm playing a rogue, specializing in dual weapon specializations, or working towards that specialization. And so there are a lot of melee attack animations in my kit. And by far and large, I find those melee attack animations to be fantastic. In fact, I find almost all of the combat animations for my NPCs that are wielding staffs, and the casting animations and the movement and attack animations within combat to all be absolutely S tier, really top notch. They're very snappy, they're very quick. They might be a little floaty, in other words, not having quite enough weight, but overall I think they're very well executed. But then when we get to the actual movement animations of just your character moving over the ground, these feel a little bit more janky to me. Especially, it feels like the start animations and the stop animations are intended to blend into the sprinting and not the run. So I feel like I'm blending out of a start into, and then back down to the run, and then from the run, back down to the stop in a way that just doesn't feel super good. And now that I'm played the game quite a bit, but following along behind my character, I've gotten more used to it. But it still feels a little like they're trying to overly jog while they're running. And then in the cinematics themselves, their use of facial animations, I was actually very happy with the way my character looked coming out of character creation with her sort of resting bitch faced. But then once she started talking and they started making her smirk and try to smile and laugh, I just felt like the facial animations are all overly exaggerated and more than a little cringe, to be honest. So, and that sent me right back to the Mirror of Transformation to remake my character in a more neutral way so that I didn't hate her during the cinematics. So the long story short is that for the most part, I'd give animations probably a B plus, maybe, or maybe a middle B. I love the combat and fight animations. I find the movement animations to be a little janky, and I find the cinematic animations, especially around the facial animations of the cinematics, to be a little cringe in some locations. Okay, and then speaking of combat animations, let's touch a little bit on the combat itself. So it's definitely skill-based, maybe not Elden Ring or Dark Souls level of skill-based, but certainly on par with some other skill-based action games like Wuthering Waves and Horizon Zero Dawn. And in fact, I find it very reminiscent of Horizon Zero Dawn and Horizon Forbidden West in terms of its combat systems. Dodging is certainly a thing that you have to do, and timing perfect defends or parries or blocks or whatever you want to call them, they're called defends in this game, is something that you also have to be good at. And your success in combat will pretty much straight up heavily rely on your ability to execute on those maneuvers. Now, one thing that Dragon Age the Veilguard does do is they allow you in the settings to change the difficulty of some of these things in a granular fashion, which I think is super smart on their part. For instance, you can independently increase the window for which you can execute a perfect defend, which is fantastic. and depending on your skill level, it may not actually be a bad idea. For instance, I find that I can dodge roll with the best of them, but I suck at timing perfect defends. And what I'm learning, especially as a melee character, is that the game really wants you to be good at perfect defends. There are a ton of skills that execute off of executing a perfect defend, and I find that just when you hit one, you can really lay in a large amount of melee damage following up a perfect defend. So don't do what I did and ignore perfect defends for the first 10 hours thinking you can dodge roll your way to victory. You will definitely run into some boss monsters and some enemies where you have to perfect defend in order to execute well. And while you're dodge rolling and perfect defending your way through the combat, don't forget to also hit pause occasionally and give your NPC companions their orders, especially those all-important combos, where you're setting up primers and detonators. And those are huge things that you want to be executing as soon as you can and as often as you can inside combat. One thing that I didn't much care for is that it feels like all of your companion abilities are on the same cooldown, or at least use the same resource. So when you use one ability, everything is on cooldown until they get whatever particular resource that they need to get it back up. That means that it's sort of an all or nothing type thing. You can't have them execute a perfect, execute a combo move, and then also have Harding a few seconds later throw a heal on you, or have Nev throw her time warp down. You basically are making a choice. Are you going to do the combo move, or are you going to do one of those other things that are also very beneficial in combat? I found combat difficulty itself to be a little all over the place. For the first 10 hours or so of the game, I felt like combat was exceedingly easy, and then I ran into a boss monster that killed me like 5 times in a row before I could get through its final phase. So yeah, if you find yourself like, oh, hey, this is all perfect and fine, and what are people talking about? And then you get, oh my God, what the fuck, killed, like 4 times in a row. Well, that has been my experience as well. And then one thing you might check if you run into that kind of situation is be sure and look at the level of the monster that you're fighting. You might find that you're like level 10 and fighting a level 25 monster. The game is perfectly happy to let you do that. And you might even succeed with a perfect execution of dodge rolls and perfect defense in a big combat like that. But you may also decide to, as I did, to choose to come back and do that boss when you've leveled up a bit. Okay, so that's character creation and animation and the combat systems. What about the story? BioWare's bread and butter. Honestly, it's too early for me to make too much of a judgment on story, so I'll delve into that a little bit more with future videos as I get further into the story. I can only say so far that it's been fine. It hasn't been anything earth-shattering, or I haven't seen any, encountered any really clever twists in terms of what I've seen so far. It's been on par with other video game stories. So I wouldn't, say that this is, knocking anything out of the park story-wise, but it's also not making me cringe to the level of like, oh, this is terrible. So story so far has been, I would say, about par. So have there been any parts of the game that I'm especially not liking? And yes, there are, in fact, a couple of things. So at some point in the game, you'll reach the ability to open up explorable areas. And these are zones that you've most likely already been through with the mission. And now you come back to the zone and it's opened up a little bit and you can kind of explore around the zone, unlock some new side quests, and find all the goodies that are in the zone, like chests and things like that. But quite often, some of the things that show up on your mini-map, you actually literally can't get to because you haven't advanced the story enough, or you haven't unlocked some particular character that you need in order to get access to those areas. But the game doesn't tell you that in any way. And so what can happen is that you end up spending huge amounts of time trying to find things in the game that are showing up on your map, but you just can't get to, and you literally couldn't get to them. And I find this hugely frustrating. And then conversely, you may also leave some things behind that you're like, well, the game obviously hasn't opened up enough for me to get to that thing. And you may in fact be able to get to it. You just haven't figured out how yet. You haven't gone around the right corner or what have you. And so both of those, I think, are bad situations. There's no reason why, if the game knows whether or not I can get to a particular item that's shown on my minimap, color that thing red, or put a mouse over that says, NA, or just don't show it. But the idea that they allow you to see things that you literally can't get to because you haven't advanced far enough in the game makes me a little crazy. And then the other thing that I'm actually not all that crazy about is the whole faction merchant system that they have in the game. And I think this is mostly just due to it not being explained very well, or really even at all. At least I didn't feel like it had been. So the system is pretty straightforward on the face of it, right? You gather stuff called valuables as you're exploring zones and going through missions. And these are essentially just vendor trash. You go to one of the faction merchants and you sell the valuables to the merchant, and in turn you get rep and gold back from the merchant. And then you can use that rep to level up the merchant, and as you level up the merchant, you can buy better gear from them or upgrade your existing gear from them. All of that seems pretty straightforward. But what they don't really describe to you is that, like, some factions are, it turns out, much better and much more suited for some classes than others. And even particular merchants within those factions may be more suited. So they leave it up to you to completely discover, oh yeah, I want to use the Veil Jumper faction for my ranged rogue and some other faction for my DPS rogue. I'm sure there are already internet guides putting out there to tell you all of this information, but I don't like as a player that I have to go to those guides to figure out how this system works, or to what smart choices are to be made in this system. And that's really the part of it that I don't like. I don't like mechanics where the game designers ask me to make choices about systems for which they've not provided a whole lot of information for me yet. And that's what I think is happening here. To muddy the waters even further, there are also some merchants that you can buy valuables from, so you can exchange gold for valuables and then take those valuables to another merchant and exchange them back for rep. And is that a good trade-off? I don't know. Is it wise to spend my gold on valuables and then use those valuables to gain rep? Or is that actually a waste and something terrible that I should probably never do? Again, I'm probably going to have to go to the internet to figure the answers to those things out, or put a whole lot more hours into the game, which I'm going to do anyway, in order to figure that out. But that's the kind of thing that I wish were better explained, or that I had more information about up front while I'm making these early choices. So those are some of the high points and low points of my first 10 to 12 hours of the game. I am overall, though, really enjoying the game, and I'm looking forward to playing more. The things that I like about the game so far pretty strongly outweigh the things that I don't like about the game. And let me say this as a high-level comment about Dragon Age: The Veilguard. It is definitely a AAA effort. Like, the amount of money and resources that have been poured into this game show. I mean, coming from a person who spent the last 12 years of his life developing what you would call AA games, sort of mid-range indie games, seeing so many systems and so much polish put into this game. I mean, the things that you can do with the graphical settings, the granular options on the difficulty settings, the incredibly elegant way that the UI is presented to you, and the incredibly clear way the UI is, for the most part, presented to you, allowing you to do comparisons as soon as you receive gear before you trade them off, before you decide if you want to use them or not, making it very clear which character pieces of gear are for. Just overall, the high level of polish throughout the game is extremely evident, and is a refreshing thing to see in a AAA game. So for that reason alone, I am actually really appreciative of the amount of effort being poured into this game. Are you playing the game so far? Are you enjoying it? What have you liked and what have you disliked so far? Let me know in the comments below. If you're enjoying my content and want to see more of these videos from a developer standpoint as I play these games, please be sure and hit the like button on this video and hit the subscribe button to the channel. I really appreciate it. Until next time, GLHF, and I'll see you soon.